The sound of heavy boots against marble floors echoed through the ornate halls of the Varelian embassy as Lieutenant Elias Cade made his way toward the ambassador's office. His uniform, now stripped of its decorations and rank insignia, felt foreign against his skin. Only the lieutenant bars remained a constant reminder of his fall from grace. "Enter," called Ambassador Thorne's voice from behind the carved wooden door. Elias stepped inside, his posture automatically stiffening into attention. Old habits died hard, especially for someone who had spent 15 years in Earth's Special Forces. "At ease, Lieutenant Thorne," said without looking up from his holographic display. "Or should I say Advisor Cade? That's your new title now." "Lieutenant is fine, sir," Elias replied, his voice flat. The ambassador finally raised his eyes, studying Elias with a calculated gaze. A career diplomat, Thorne had the uncanny ability to read people like books, a skill that had served him well across 17 different planetary postings. "You understand the nature of this assignment, I presume?" Thorne's tone was measured professional. "I'm to serve as a security consultant for the Earth Embassy on Virelia. A diplomatic exile, if we're being honest, sir." Thorne's lips twitched upward briefly. "Honesty has its place, Lieutenant, but diplomacy often requires selective clarity. Your record suggests you struggle with that concept." The unspoken reference to the Rigel incident hung between them. Elias had disobeyed direct orders to withdraw from a humanitarian evacuation zone when a local militia had attacked civilian shelters. His actions had saved 300 refugees, but violated 6 different protocols and nearly caused an interplanetary incident. The military tribunal had been surprisingly lenient, a demotion rather than a dishonorable discharge. Though everyone understood this advisory position was nothing but a convenient way to remove a problematic officer from the spotlight. "Your skills are needed here, Lieutenant," Thorne continued, gesturing to a seat. "Virelia is complicated. They've maintained independence from the Galactic Confederation for centuries, through a combination of valuable natural resources and an impenetrable culture of tradition. They're xenophobic, hierarchical, and exceedingly proud. Yet, for the first time in their history, they're showing willingness to engage in meaningful diplomatic relations." A holographic image of a tall, elegant figure appeared above the ambassador's desk. The Varelian female had the characteristic silver-blue skin and elongated features of her species, but there was something distinctive about her, bearing a quiet determination in her violet eyes. "Princess Ariana," Thorne explained. "The sole heir to the Varelian throne and remarkably a proponent of reform. She's been pushing her father, Emperor Valerian, to modernize certain aspects of their society, including their isolationist stance. The royal court is divided on the matter, with many noble houses vehemently opposing any change to their traditions." Elias studied the image. "And my role in this, sir?" "Tonight, the princess will be attending a diplomatic gathering at the Central Spire. It's unprecedented. Varelian royalty rarely participate in foreign functions. I need security personnel who understand both diplomatic protocols and potential threats. Your background makes you uniquely qualified." Thorne's expression turned serious. "This isn't some routine assignment, Cade. The stakes are extraordinarily high. If anything disrupts these initial talks, it could set back Earth-Varelian relations by decades." Elias felt a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. "I understand, sir." "No, I don't think you do," Thorne countered. "The Varelians have a particularly rigid social structure. Their traditions aren't merely cultural, they're practically encoded into their DNA after thousands of years of ritual practice. One of these traditions, the Dareth Bond, is especially sacred. It's a life debt ritual, so fundamental to their society that it's referenced in almost every aspect of their legal and ethical systems." "A life debt?" Elias asked, his interest piqued despite himself. "When a Varelian royal's life is saved by another, an ancient bond is formed, one that connects their life forces in ways our scientists still don't fully comprehend. It's part mystical, part biological. The Varelians believe it to be the will of their ancestors, manifesting through blood and sacrifice." Elias nodded slowly, processing the information. And this relates to tonight's function? How exactly? It doesn't, Thorne said firmly. I'm simply providing cultural context. Your job is to observe, protect our interests, and stay inconspicuous. Remember, Cade, you're not here to be a hero. You're here because it's better than a dishonorable discharge. Is that clear? Crystal clear, sir. The central spire lived up to its name, a twisting monolith of pearlescent stone that reached toward Virelia's twin moons, like a giant's finger pointing to the heavens. Elias adjusted the collar of his formal attire, a dark blue Earth Diplomatic Corps uniform that felt stiff and constraining compared to his usual military gear. From his position near the eastern wall of the grand reception hall, he had a clear view of the entire room while remaining relatively unnoticed. The hall was filled with a mixture of Earth diplomats, representatives from allied worlds, and a select handful of Virelian nobles who had deigned to attend. "Quite the spectacle, isn't it?" said a voice beside him. Elias turned to find a human woman in her 50s, elegant in an ambassador's formal wear. He recognized her as Dr. Lydia Savoy Earth's leading xenoanthropologist and cultural liaison. "It's certainly elaborate," Elias replied, gesturing toward the ornate decorations and ceremonial guards positioned throughout the hall. "The Virelians don't do anything halfway," Dr. Savoy noted. "Every gesture, every decoration has meaning. See those crystalline formations hanging from the ceiling. They represent the ancestral bloodlines of the royal house. And those guards aren't just for show, they're sentinel elites sworn to the emperor since childhood. Their presence here is a significant honor." Elias nodded, his attention caught by a subtle shift in the room's energy. The assembled guests were turning toward the main entrance, where a herald had appeared. Her Royal Highness, Princess Ariana Virilan Solaris, heir to the eternal throne keeper of the sacred flames and voice of the coming dawn. The herald announced, his voice resonating through the hall. The princess entered, and the difference between her holographic image and physical presence was immediately apparent. She moved with fluid grace, her silver blue skin catching the light like polished metal. Her traditional royal garments, flowing robes of deep purple and silver, seemed to shimmer with every step. But it was her expression that caught Elias's attention. Beneath the ceremonial poise was a sharp intelligence and what appeared to be carefully controlled tension. "She's taking an enormous risk being here," Dr. Savoy whispered. "The conservative faction of the court sees any interaction with outsiders as contamination of their sacred bloodlines. There are rumors that some noble houses would rather see her dead than allowing her reforms to continue." Elias's senses sharpened at the word dead. His eyes scanned the room more intently, noting positions, behaviors, potential threats. Years of combat training couldn't be switched off with a change of uniform. Princess Ariana moved through the gathering with practiced diplomacy, exchanging formal greetings with Earth officials. When she reached Ambassador Thorne, she inclined her head slightly, a gesture that Dr. Savoy quietly informed Elias was unprecedented, as Virelian royalty traditionally acknowledged no one as equals. "The winds of change blow even through the most ancient forests," Ariana said to Thorne, her voice melodic, with the distinctive Virelian accent that made human languages sound like poetry. "And with change comes new growth." "Your Highness," Thorne replied, clearly reciting a practiced response to the formal greeting. Elias continued his surveillance, noting with unease that several Virelian nobles were watching the princess with barely concealed disdain. One in particular, a tall, imposing figure with elaborate facial markings identifying him as a high-ranking court official, seemed to be tracking her every movement with cold calculation. The evening progressed with speeches and ceremonial exchanges. Elias maintained his vigilance, though nothing overtly suspicious had occurred. As servants began distributing drinks for a traditional toast, he noticed a slight irregularity, a server moving with too much purpose too directly toward the princess. Instinct took over. Elias moved before his conscious mind had fully processed the threat, slipping through the crowd with practiced efficiency. The server's hand reached inside his ceremonial vest, emerging with a glint of metal, a ritual dagger with ancient symbols etched on its blade. Time seemed to slow. Elias saw the assassin's arm begin its arc toward the princess's exposed back. He saw the momentary widening of Ambassador Thorne's eyes as he too spotted the threat. He saw guards turning too distant to intercept. 3 long strides, and Elias lunged, placing himself between the blade and Ariana. Pain exploded across his chest as the ceremonial dagger sliced through his uniform and deep into flesh. He heard shouts, saw the shock on the princess's face as she turned, felt the warm flow of blood soaking his shirt. The would-be assassin was instantly swarmed by sentinel guards, but Elias barely registered this. His attention was fixed on the strange phenomenon occurring where his blood had spattered onto the floor. The droplets were glowing, pulsing, with an unearthly light that seemed to reach out toward the princess. Ariana's expression transformed from shock to recognition to what appeared to be horror. "No," she whispered, the single word heavy with implications Elias couldn't understand. As consciousness began to slip away, Elias saw the glowing blood forming intricate patterns on the marble floor, patterns that matched the symbols on the ceremonial pillars throughout the hall. The last thing he registered before darkness claimed him was Ariana, dropping to her knees beside him, pressing her hand to his wound, and the sensation of ice and fire racing through his veins where her skin met his blood. "The Dareth bond awakens," someone said in a voice filled with awe and dread. "The ancestors have chosen." Elias awoke to the sensation of soft fabric against his skin and the scent of unfamiliar spices in the air. His eyes opened to a high dome ceiling inlaid with shimmering materials that caught the light like thousands of tiny stars. He attempted to sit up, only to be halted by a sharp pain across his chest. "Be still," came a melodic voice from nearby. "The healing is not complete." Turning his head, Elias found Princess Ariana, seated beside his bed, her formal attire replaced by simpler robes of deep blue. They were alone in what appeared to be an opulent chamber within the royal palace, a place no human had likely ever been permitted to enter. "What happened?" he asked, his voice rough from disuse. "The assassin was captured and has been interrogated," she replied, her violet eyes studying him with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "He was hired by those who oppose my reforms, though he died before revealing which noble house orchestrated the attempt." "Died?" Elias questioned. "Our interrogation methods are thorough," she said without elaboration. "But that is not our most pressing concern." Elias noticed then that she was absently tracing a pattern on her wrist, a pattern that glowed faintly beneath her silver-blue skin. Looking down at his own chest, he saw that beneath the bandages covering his wound, a similar luminescence pulsed in rhythm with his heartbeat. "The Dareth bond," he said, remembering the ambassador's briefing. Ariana nodded gravely. "You understand the concept, then?" "Only vaguely. Something about a life debt tradition." She rose and moved to a carved stone basin in the corner of the room, dipping her fingers into what appeared to be glowing liquid. "It is far more than a tradition, Lieutenant Cade. It is the oldest and most sacred connection in our culture, a bond that transcends mere obligation." Returning to his bedside, she continued, "When you intercepted the blade, meant for me, when your blood spilled upon the ancestral symbols on our sacred ground, you triggered a biological and spiritual process that cannot be undone. Our life forces are now connected." Elias tried to process this information. "Connected how exactly?" "In stages," she explained. "The Dareth bond develops through 5 phases. We have completed only the first initiation through blood. The remaining 4 must be fulfilled according to ancient law, or—" She hesitated. "Or what? Or we both will perish," she said simply. "The bond, once awakened, demands completion. If denied, it causes a wasting sickness that affects both participants. Our scientists have studied the phenomenon for centuries, but have found no way to sever an initiated bond." Elias stared at her in disbelief. You're saying I'm magically bound to you, and if I don't complete some alien ritual, we'll both die. It is not magic, she corrected firmly. It is a biochemical and quantum resonance that our ancestors engineered into our genetic code thousands of years ago. The fact that it can affect human physiology is unprecedented. We believed it was specific to Virelian biology. She looked troubled by this revelation, and Elias wondered what other assumptions her people might have made about humans that were proving false. So what happens now? He asked. Now you become my Dareth Sentinel, my bound protector, until all phases of the bond are complete. Her tone suggested this was non-negotiable. And if I refuse? Ariana's expression hardened. Then, you condemn us both to a slow, painful death. The bond cannot be broken, Lieutenant. Not by choice, not by distance, not by technology. It is woven into the very fabric of our beings now. Elias attempted to sit up again more carefully this time. I need to contact my superiors, explain the situation. Ambassador Thorne has already been informed, she interrupted. He has agreed that you will remain here as my security advisor, is the term he used. A diplomatic fiction to explain your presence in the royal court. I don't have a say in this. Did you have a say when you threw yourself in front of that blade? She countered, a hint of genuine curiosity in her voice. Elias had no good answer for that. His action had been instinctive, the result of years of training, and perhaps something more fundamental to his character. The second phase will begin soon, Ariana said after a moment of silence. Memory sharing. It cannot be controlled or directed. The bond will select which memories are exchanged between us. Wait, Elias protested, alarm rising within him. You'll see my memories, all of them. Not all, she clarified. Only those the bond deems significant to our connection. Similarly, I cannot choose which of my memories will be revealed to you. It is a process of mutual vulnerability. The thought of anyone, especially this alien princess, witnessing his darkest moments, sent a chill through Elias. There were things in his past that he had never spoken of, things that haunted his dreams. How long do I have before this second phase begins? Days, perhaps, she said. And there is something else you should know. Ariana hesitated, seeming to choose her words carefully. My father, the Emperor, does not know the full extent of what has occurred. He has been told only that a human security officer prevented an assassination attempt and was injured in the process. Why keep the Dareth bond secret from him? Her violet eyes met his directly. Because when he learns that his only heir is now bonded to a human, there will be consequences that neither of us may be prepared to face. Elias's introduction to the Virelian royal court came 3 days later, once the palace physicians declared him sufficiently healed to walk. He had spent the intervening time confined to his chambers, learning about Virelian culture and politics from data feeds and occasional visits from Ariana, who seemed determined to prepare him for the complex social environment he was about to enter. The throne room of the Eternal Palace stretched longer than a football field, its walls lined with towering statues of previous emperors. The ceiling opened to the sky through a series of precisely cut crystal panels that scattered rainbow light across the assembled courtiers. At the far end, Emperor Valerian sat upon a throne, carved from a single piece of what appeared to be fossilized wood, its surface embedded with glowing minerals. Elias walked beside Ariana, painfully aware of the hundreds of Virelian nobles, watching his every move with expressions ranging from curiosity to unveiled disgust. He wore a specially designed uniform that blended Earth diplomatic corps styling with traditional Virelian elements, an attempt at cultural diplomacy that felt awkward and performative. Remember, Ariana murmured as they approached the throne. Speak only when directly addressed, maintain eye contact, but do not stare, and under no circumstances mention the bond. Emperor Valerian was imposing even by Virelian standards, his silver-blue skin bearing the additional markings of age and wisdom constellation-like patterns across his forehead and cheeks. His eyes, the same violet as his daughter's, carried the weight of centuries of tradition. Father, Ariana said, performing a formal bow that Elias attempted to mimic. I present Lieutenant Elias Cade of Earth, who acted to preserve my life during the regrettable incident at the diplomatic function. The Emperor studied Elias with unreadable eyes. Approach, human, he commanded, his voice resonant and powerful. Elias stepped forward, feeling the weight of tradition and suspicion pressing down upon him. You intervened when my daughter's life was threatened, the Emperor stated. This action, while unexpected from an outsider, merits recognition. You will be granted the temporary status of honor guard during your recovery, and until diplomatic protocols for your return to Earth can be arranged. It was clearly a prepared statement, likely negotiated between the Emperor's advisors and the Earth Embassy. Elias inclined his head in acknowledgement, noting the subtle emphasis on temporary and return to Earth. Thank you, Your Imperial Majesty, he replied, using the formal address Ariana had taught him. As he straightened, Elias became aware of a tall, austere Virelian watching him from the Emperor's right side. The male's facial markings identified him as a high-ranking noble, and the medallion around his neck bore the symbol of the Imperial Advisory Council. High Counselor Uxon, Ariana whispered, following his gaze. My father's most trusted advisor, and the most powerful voice for tradition in the court. Be wary of him. Uxon's eyes narrowed slightly as he noticed their exchange, and Elias had the distinct impression of being assessed as one might evaluate a potential threat or a useful tool. The formal presentation continued with ritualized exchanges, but Elias's attention was repeatedly drawn to Uxon, who never spoke, but seemed to observe everything with calculating precision. There was something familiar in that gaze, a quality Elias had seen in commanders who viewed soldiers as expendable assets rather than people. Later, as they left the throne room, Elias felt a strange sensation wash over him, a momentary disorientation, followed by what felt like a cool breeze across his consciousness. Beside him, Ariana faltered mid-step. It begins, she whispered, reaching out to steady herself against a pillar. The second phase. The world around Elias dissolved, replaced by images and sensations not his own. He was a child running through crystalline gardens, feeling the weight of expectations even then. He was an adolescent, standing before the ancestral flame during an initiation ceremony, understanding for the first time the isolation that came with royal blood. He was Ariana, watching her mother's burial, the weight of an empire settling onto her shoulders as the funeral pyres burned. Emotions that weren't his crashed through him: determination, loneliness, fierce intelligence constrained by tradition, and a desperate hope that her world could change without losing what made it sacred. When reality reasserted itself, Elias found himself on his knees in the corridor, Ariana similarly positioned across from him. Her eyes were wide, filled with the same shock he felt. You, she began, her voice unsteady. The settlement on Rigel 4. You defied orders to save those refugees. Elias swallowed hard, knowing exactly which memory she had witnessed his most defining failure and act of conscience combined. Yes, you chose those lives over your career, your future. It wasn't a question, but a realization. I couldn't leave them to die. The simple truth that had cost him everything professionally. Around them, court officials and guards were gathering, concerned by their sudden collapse. Ariana composed herself quickly, rising to her feet with practiced royal dignity. A momentary weakness from my recent ordeal, she announced smoothly. The human's injury appears to have reopened slightly. We will retire to the healing chambers. It was a convenient fiction that allowed them to withdraw from public view, escorted by guards to Ariana's private quarters. Once alone, she turned to him, her expression transformed by what she had experienced. You were punished for saving lives, she said, still processing the concept. On Virelia, such an act of honor would be rewarded, not condemned. Earth military has a different view of honor, Elias replied, still reeling from the memories he had witnessed. Following orders is paramount, even when those orders conflict with... He struggled to find the right words. With the value of life itself, she finished for him. I understand now why the bond chose you. There is a resonance between us. Elias looked at her with new understanding as well. Your reforms, they're not just political maneuvering. You genuinely believe your people need to change. As you believed those refugees needed to be saved regardless of the cost to yourself. She moved to a window overlooking the capital city, its spires glowing in the light of the setting suns. The Dareth Bond does not make mistakes, Lieutenant Cade. It has always been our most sacred truth that those joined by blood and sacrifice are joined for purpose. What purpose could possibly be served by binding us together? Elias asked the reality of their situation, settling back over him like a weight. Oriana turned to face him, and for the first time he saw something like hope in her expression. Perhaps to build a bridge between our worlds that cannot be easily broken. The bond has never formed between a Varelian and an outsider. Before that alone changes everything we thought we knew about our ancestral connections. Elias wasn't sure if he should feel honored or trapped by this distinction. What happens now with the memory sharing? It will continue intermittently over the coming days, she explained. We cannot control when or where it occurs, which is why you must remain close to me. If we are separated during an episode, what he prompted when she hesitated. The effects can be disorienting, painful even. The bond seeks proximity during its development phases. Elias considered this new complication. So I truly am to be your bound protector then, following you everywhere. For now, she agreed, until the bond stabilizes or completes its cycle. And how many more phases are there? 3, she said. After memory sharing comes the protection phase, where the bond physically compels proximity and heightens protective instincts. Then, unification, where our minds can communicate without words. Finally, if the bond is fully accepted by both participants, there is completion, a permanent linking that allows for shared strength healing and awareness regardless of distance. Elias tried to imagine being permanently connected to another being in such an intimate way. The concept was both fascinating and terrifying. And if we don't reach completion, he asked, then we remain in whatever phase we've achieved with its limitations and requirements until death. Her expression turned solemn. There is no severing the Dareth bond once initiated, Elias. The only escape is death, and due to the nature of the connection, the death of one often leads to the death of the other. The implication was clear. Their fates were now irrevocably intertwined, whether they wished it or not. Your Earth ambassador seems quite disturbed by these developments. Ariana noted, changing the subject slightly. He has requested your return to the embassy multiple times. I'm not surprised, Elias replied. This is unprecedented territory for human diplomacy. Do you wish to return to your people? She asked, her tone carefully neutral. Elias considered the question. His rational mind said yes. He needed to report to his superiors to be examined by human doctors, to find some way to verify or potentially counter Ariana's claims about the bond. But another part of him, growing stronger with each passing hour, recoiled at the thought of separation from her. I need to at least communicate with them, he answered finally. They'll want to understand what's happening. Of course, she agreed. I shall arrange a secure communication channel. But Elias, her use of his first name caught his attention. Be cautious about how much you reveal. There are factions within my court who would view this bond as an abomination, a corruption of our most sacred tradition. If they believe I am permanently bound to a human, they might decide you're unfit to rule, he concluded, understanding the political ramifications. Ariana nodded grimly. Or worse, they might decide that eliminating you would free me from the contamination of human influence. The Dareth bond is meant to be a blessing, a divine connection. In our history, it has only formed between Varelians of noble blood. This deviation will frighten many who cling to the old ways. Like High Counselor Uxon, Elias observed. Especially Uxon, she confirmed. He has spent decades cultivating influence over my father and positioning his nephew as a potential consort for me. Your presence threatens everything he has worked for." The political landscape was becoming clearer, and Elias didn't like what he saw. He was not merely caught in an alien cultural tradition, but had become an unwitting pawn in what appeared to be a complex power struggle for the future of Virelia itself. "So I'm either your divinely appointed protector or a corrupting alien influence," he summarized dryly, "depending on which faction is talking." "Welcome to Virelian court politics, Lieutenant," Ariana replied with the ghost of a smile, "where destiny and conspiracy are often indistinguishable from one another." In the days that followed, Elias experienced more memory exchanges with Ariana, sometimes brief glimpses, other times extended sequences that left him disoriented and emotionally raw. He witnessed her childhood isolation within the palace walls, her secret studies of Earth culture, against her tutor's wishes, her growing determination to change her society's isolationist stance. In turn, she experienced his military training combat deployments, the camaraderie of his unit, and the crushing weight of the Rigel 4 incident that had derailed his career. These involuntary exchanges created an intimacy between them that transcended normal human or Virelian connections. Elias found himself understanding Ariana's subtle expressions, anticipating her thoughts, feeling a growing protectiveness that went beyond duty or obligation. "The protection phase approaches," Ariana explained during one of their private conversations in the palace gardens, one of the few places they could speak without being overheard by court officials. "You will begin to sense threats to my safety more acutely, and the bond will cause physical discomfort if we are separated." "How much discomfort are we talking about?" Elias asked, watching the strange luminescent plants that surrounded them sway in the gentle breeze. "It varies depending on the strength of the bond and the individuals involved," she admitted. "For some historical pairs, separation caused merely anxiety or restlessness. For others," she hesitated. "For others, the pain was debilitating." Elias absorbed this information with growing concern. His position within the palace remained tenuous at best. The emperor tolerated his presence only because Ariana had framed it as a diplomatic courtesy and temporary arrangement. If the truth of the Dareth bond became known, or if the protection phase manifested as strongly as Ariana suggested it might, their carefully constructed fiction would crumble. "Your father must suspect something," he observed. "I've been at your side constantly for over a week now." "He believes I am merely honoring the life debt our culture demands," she replied. "A temporary arrangement of gratitude before you return to Earth. He does not know, cannot know the depth of what has occurred." Their conversation was interrupted by the approach of a Virelian female in the distinctive armor of the royal guard. Unlike the ceremonial sentinels who stood watch in the palace, this guard moved with the practiced efficiency of a true warrior. "Your Highness," she said, bowing formally to Ariana. "The Emperor requests your presence in the council chamber immediately." Ariana's expression revealed nothing, but Elias felt a flutter of anxiety through their strengthening bond. "Did my father indicate the nature of this summons, Riva?" "No, Your Highness," the guard replied. "Only that it concerns matters of succession and tradition." Elias and Ariana exchanged a look of concern. Those specific terms, succession and tradition, had been the consistent rallying cry of the conservative faction, led by Uxan. "We will attend him at once," Ariana declared, rising gracefully from her seat. As they followed Riva through the palace corridors, Elias noticed the guard casting curious glances his way. Unlike most Virelians, her gaze held no disgust or suspicion, only thoughtful assessment. "Commander Riva leads my personal security detail," Ariana explained quietly. "She has served my family for 3 generations and has more battlefield experience than most of our military command." 3 generations. Elias questioned, studying the guard, who appeared to be in her physical prime. "Virelians have considerably longer lifespans than humans," Ariana reminded him. "Riva has seen 270 cycles of our moons." Before Elias could process this information, they arrived at the council chamber, a circular room, dominated by a massive table carved from the same luminescent wood as the emperor's throne. Around it sat the 12 high counselors with Emperor Valerian at the head and Uxan at his right hand. "Daughter," the emperor acknowledged as they entered. "And Lieutenant Cade." His hesitation before Elias's name carried volumes of unspoken sentiment. "You summoned us, father," Ariana replied with formal deference, taking her designated place at the table. Elias remained standing behind her chair, as was appropriate for a guard, rather than a council member. "The council has been discussing matters of great importance to the future of our empire." Valerian began, his tone measured. "High Counselor Uxan has brought forward concerns regarding succession and the preservation of our sacred bloodlines." Uxan's thin lips curved into what might generously be called a smile. "Your Highness, we have observed with growing concern your continued association with the human officer. While gratitude for his intervention is appropriate, the extended nature of this arrangement has raised questions about adherence to our most sacred traditions. Lieutenant Cade serves as my honored guard while recovering from wounds sustained in my defense," Ariana replied smoothly. "This is in keeping with our traditions of acknowledging life debts." "Indeed," Uxan agreed with false pleasantness. "However, tradition also dictates that such arrangements be temporary and ceremonial. The lieutenant has been at your side constantly, including during matters of state and private audiences. This exceeds traditional boundaries." Elias felt tension radiating from Ariana, though her face remained impassive. Furthermore, Uxan continued, "The time has come to address your future princess. As sole heir to the eternal throne, your marriage and continuation of the royal bloodline cannot be delayed indefinitely. The council proposes that formal courtship rituals begin immediately, with appropriate noble candidates from the ancient houses." And there it was, the real purpose of this meeting. Uxan was moving to secure Ariana's marriage to a conservative noble, likely his own nephew, before her reforms could gain too much traction. "I am honored by the council's concern for our bloodlines," Ariana responded diplomatically. "However, my focus remains on the modernization initiatives that will secure Virelia's position in the changing galactic landscape. Marriage considerations can wait until these crucial matters are addressed." Uxan's expression hardened almost imperceptibly. "With respect, Princess tradition demands that bloodline security take precedence over policy initiatives, particularly experimental ones involving increased contact with outsiders." The way he said "outsiders" while glancing at Elias made the word sound like a communicable disease. "The princess has demonstrated considerable wisdom in her reform proposals," interjected another counselor, an older female with elaborate silver markings around her eyes. "Perhaps tradition can accommodate some measure of innovation without sacrificing its core principles." A murmur of mixed agreement and protest rippled through the council. Elias observed the division among the members, mentally cataloging who appeared to support Ariana and who aligned with Uxan. "Innovation is welcome when it strengthens our people," Uxan countered. "But certain traditions are immutable because they preserve the very essence of what makes us Virelian. The sacred bloodlines, the ancestral bonds, these cannot be compromised without risking our identity as a civilization." Emperor Valerian, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "Both perspectives have merit. My daughter's vision for our future shows foresight. Yet Counselor Uxan's concern for our traditions is equally valid. We must find a path that honors both." "Perhaps," Uxan suggested smoothly, "the princess might demonstrate her respect for tradition by participating in the celestial purification ritual during the coming alignment of our moons. Such a public recommitment to our ancestral ways would reassure those concerned about her progressive tendencies." Elias felt a spike of alarm from Ariana at the mention of this ritual, though her external composure never wavered. "The purification is an ancient and sacred ceremony," she acknowledged. "I would need time to prepare properly for such an undertaking." "Of course," Uxan agreed magnanimously. 3 days should be sufficient. The alignment begins then, and the ritual must be performed at its peak. The Emperor nodded in agreement. It is decided then. Ariana will undergo the purification, and afterward we shall revisit the question of courtship and succession planning. As the council session concluded, and they departed, Elias waited until they were in a private corridor before questioning Ariana. What is this purification ritual, and why did it concern you? Her expression was troubled as she led him toward a secluded alcove. It is one of our oldest ceremonies, a ritual cleansing meant to purge external influences and reconnect a Virelian to their ancestral essence. It involves isolation in the sacred temples, fasting meditation, and exposure to certain substances that enhance connection to our genetic memory. That doesn't sound particularly sinister, Elias observed cautiously. In itself, it is not, she agreed. But Uxan's insistence on this specific ritual at this specific time is suspicious. The purification is known to temporarily disrupt unusual energy patterns within the body. Understanding dawned on Elias. He suspects the Dareth bond. Or he simply hopes to separate us long enough to test his theory, she confirmed. The ritual requires absolute isolation. No guards, no attendants, only the temple priestesses are permitted contact with the supplicant. And if we're forcibly separated during the protection phase? Elias didn't need to complete the thought. They both understood the potential consequences. Precisely, Ariana said grimly. If the bond has progressed as I believe it has, the separation could cause significant distress, perhaps enough to reveal the truth of our connection to everyone. Elias considered their limited options. Could you refuse the ritual? Not without raising even more suspicion and potentially offending my father, she replied. The Emperor's suggestion is as good as a command. Then we need a contingency plan, Elias decided. A way for me to remain close enough to maintain the bond without violating the ritual's isolation requirements. Ariana looked thoughtful. The sacred temples stand in the Hill of Ancestors several miles from the palace. They are ancient structures, portions of which predate even our written history. There may be possibilities. Their planning was interrupted by the approach of Commander Riva, who bowed formally before speaking in a lowered voice. Your Highness, I must speak with you urgently regarding security arrangements for the purification ceremony. Ariana nodded. Of course, Commander. Please accompany us to my chambers where we can discuss this privately. Once securely within Ariana's private quarters, Riva's demeanor changed subtly, her formal rigidity, giving way to what appeared to be genuine concern. Princess, I must advise against participating in this ritual under current circumstances, she stated bluntly. There are irregularities in the Council's preparations that worry me. What sort of irregularities? Elias asked. Riva gave him an appraising look before answering. High Counselor Uxan has personally selected the priestesses who will conduct the ceremony, all from noble houses, aligned with his faction. This is unusual. Traditionally, the temple elders choose based on spiritual qualifications, not political affiliations. Is there any precedent for this? Ariana inquired. None in recent history, Riva confirmed. Additionally, Uxan has ordered his personal guard to secure the temple perimeter, rather than the royal sentinels, who would normally perform this duty. The implications were clear. Uxan was creating conditions where he would have complete control over Ariana during the ritual, with no loyalist nearby to intervene if something went wrong. He's isolating you, Elias concluded, cutting you off from anyone who might interfere with whatever he's planning. Ariana's expression hardened with resolve. Then we must ensure his plan fails. Commander Riva, I need to know if there are any among the temple staff who remain loyal to the crown above the council. Elder Sonai served your mother and maintains the old ways, Riva replied without hesitation. She has no love for Uxan's political maneuvering within sacred spaces. Can you get a message to her without arousing suspicion? Riva nodded. I can, Your Highness. Good. Tell her I require information about the ancient passages beneath the Hill of Ancestors, specifically any that connect to the purification chamber. Ariana turned to Elias. The temples were built above extensive cave systems that our ancestors used for various purposes. If these passages still exist, I could remain close enough to maintain the bond without being detected. Elias finished understanding her plan. Precisely, she turned back to Riva. Commander, what I am about to share with you must remain absolutely confidential, even from your most trusted officers. Riva straightened her expression solemn. I am bound by blood oath to your line, princess. Your secrets are mine to protect with my life. Ariana took a deep breath. Lieutenant Cade and I are connected by a Dareth bond. It activated when he intercepted the assassination attempt. To her credit, Riva's only reaction was a slight widening of her eyes. A Dareth bond, with a human that is unprecedented, and potentially dangerous if Yuxin discovers it before I can secure my position, Ariana confirmed. The bond is progressing rapidly. We believe it will enter the protection phase, soon making separation physically dangerous for both of us. The timing of the purification ritual is no coincidence then, Riva concluded. Yuxin must suspect something. Or he's creating conditions that will force the truth to reveal itself, Elias suggested. Either way, we need a solution that keeps me close to Ariana, without violating the ritual's protocols. Riva considered this challenge with the tactical precision of a veteran commander. The passages beneath the temples might work, but they haven't been used in generations. They could be collapsed or guarded by ancient security measures. What kind of security measures? Elias asked. Our ancestors were inventive in their protections, Riva replied cryptically. Biological, mechanical, sometimes combining elements of both. Many of their methods have been lost to time. We have 3 days to prepare, Ariana said, redirecting the conversation to immediate necessities. Riva, contact Elder Sonai as soon as possible. We need maps of those passages and information about any remaining security systems. And I need to understand exactly what this purification ritual entails, Elias added. The specific procedures, timing, everything, so we can identify when you'll be most vulnerable. Ariana nodded in agreement. I'll provide everything I know about the ritual, but we must also prepare for the possibility that Yuxin has altered the traditional procedures to serve his purposes. One more thing, Riva interjected. If you truly share a Dareth bond, then according to the ancient texts, you should be developing certain abilities. Enhanced awareness of each other's presence, emotional states, perhaps even thoughts. We've experienced memory sharing, Ariana confirmed. Then use it, Riva advised. The bond itself may be your greatest asset if Yuxin attempts to harm either of you. In the histories, bonded pairs could draw strength from one another, share sensory information, even temporarily access each other's physical capabilities in times of extreme need. Elias and Ariana exchanged looks of surprise. Neither had considered that the bond might provide tactical advantages rather than just complications. The next 3 days will be crucial, Riva continued. You must strengthen your connection as much as possible before the separation. According to the old stories, bonded pairs would prepare for potential separation through a process called evarishen, something like soul anchoring in your language. And how exactly does one anchor a soul? Elias asked, not entirely comfortable with the metaphysical terminology. Through shared experience, focused intention, and physical proximity, Riva explained. The specifics vary across accounts, but the principle remains consistent. The stronger the connection before separation, the more resilient it becomes during forced absence. Ariana looked thoughtful. My mother once spoke of the ancient bonded guardians who could maintain their connection across great distances through such practices. I had thought it merely legend. Many legends have their roots in truth, Your Highness, Riva replied, particularly those concerning the Dareth bond. As they continued planning, Elias felt the weight of their situation settling over him. What had begun as a simple diplomatic assignment had evolved into a life-altering connection to an alien princess and placed him at the center of an interplanetary political crisis. Yet beneath the complexity and danger, he sensed something else growing, a purpose, a connection that transcended cultural boundaries, and perhaps offered something he had been missing since his fall from grace in Earth's military, a cause worth fighting for. The 3 days before the purification ritual passed in a blur of preparation, subterfuge, and increasingly intense bond experiences. Elder Sonai, through coded messages delivered by Riva, provided ancient maps of the temple complex, including the forgotten passages beneath the purification chamber. The maps were fragmentary and written in an archaic form of the Varelian language, requiring Ariana to translate them herself to avoid involving potentially untrustworthy scholars. Meanwhile, Elias and Ariana dedicated themselves to strengthening their bond through the soul-anchoring process Riva had described. They spent hours in close proximity, sharing memories voluntarily, instead of waiting for the bond to trigger exchanges, and practicing focused awareness of each other's emotional states. "I can sense your constant vigilance," Ariana commented during one such session. They sat cross-legged, facing each other in her private meditation chamber, the air heavy with aromatic incense that helped Varelians focus their mental energies. "It never fully stops, even when you appear relaxed. Military training becomes instinct after a while," Elias explained. "Always scanning for threats, evaluating exits, assessing potential weapons in the environment. It must be exhausting to live in such a state of constant readiness." Elias considered this. "I've never really thought about it that way. It's just normal for me. I sense something else beneath it," she continued, her violet eyes studying him with unnerving perception. "A restlessness, as though you're seeking something you haven't found." The accuracy of her observation unsettled him. "The bond is getting stronger," he deflected. "Yes," she agreed, allowing the subject change. "I can feel your presence even when we're in separate rooms now, like a warmth at the edge of my consciousness. For me, it's more like a musical note held continuously in the background," Elias tried to explain. "I always know which direction to find you, how far away you are." These developments both fascinated and alarmed him. The bond was becoming far more than the simple biological connection Ariana had initially described. It was reshaping his perception of reality itself. On the evening before the ritual, Commander Riva brought them final confirmation of their suspicions. Uxin had indeed modified the traditional purification ceremony. The ritual normally involves meditation, fasting, and exposure to ancestral memory stones, she reported in Ariana's chambers. But Uxin has added an element, an ancient elixir called Voshanti, that supposedly enhances connection to ancestral memories. "Voshanti hasn't been used in ceremonies for 3 centuries, Ariana said with alarm. "It was discontinued because it rendered supplicants completely suggestible while under its influence." "Mind control," Elias translated grimly. "Essentially, yes," she confirmed. "It opens neural pathways typically reserved for ancestral memory, making the mind vulnerable to external suggestion that it interprets as the voice of ancestors." "The perfect opportunity for Uxin to plant ideas that serve his agenda," Riva concluded. Elias paced the room, processing this new threat. "So, not only is he trying to separate us to expose the bond, but he's also planning to brainwash you while you're isolated." "It appears so," Ariana agreed. "Though brainwash isn't precisely accurate. Voshanti creates a temporary state where ancestral authority is magnified. If Uxin presents his suggestions as the will of my ancestors, my culturally conditioned respect for their wisdom would make resistance extremely difficult." "Can you refuse to drink it?" Elias asked. "Refusing any element of the purification once it has begun would be seen as rejection of our most sacred traditions," she explained. "It would provide Uxin exactly the ammunition he needs to declare me unfit for succession." Riva interjected with a tactical observation. "There may be another option. The temple passages Elder Sonai identified include one that opens into a small chamber behind the ceremonial wall of the purification room. Historically, temple guardians would observe rituals from this hidden position to ensure proper procedures were followed. So I could potentially interrupt if things go wrong," Elias suggested. "Yes, But timing would be crucial, Riva cautioned. Interrupting too early would expose your presence without justification. Too late and whatever Yuxin has planned might already take effect. We need a signal, Ariana decided. Something that would tell you when intervention is necessary. The bond itself could provide that, Elias suggested. If you're in genuine distress, I should be able to sense it now. Ariana nodded in agreement. And I'll attempt to project a specific thought pattern. If I detect manipulation or danger, the memory of the assassination attempt. It's vivid enough in both our minds to be recognizable through the bond. As they finalized their plans, Elias felt the bond between them pulse with a new intensity. The protection phase was fully manifesting now, creating an almost physical sensation of connection, like an invisible tether, linking them together. Remember, Riva advised as they concluded their preparations, the temple passages are ancient and may contain defenses designed to keep outsiders away from sacred chambers. Move carefully and respect any symbols or markings you encounter. Our ancestors believed in protecting sacred spaces both physically and spiritually. I'll remember, Elias promised, though he privately wondered how he would recognize ancient Virelian security measures, let alone circumvent them. As if sensing his concern, Ariana took his hand, the contact sending a wave of warmth through the bond. Trust in what we've built these past days, she said softly. The bond will guide you when knowledge fails. The night before the ritual, as Elias tried to rest in preparation for the challenges ahead, he experienced the most vivid memory exchange, yet not a fragmented glimpse, but a complete immersion in Ariana's past. He found himself standing in a vast ceremonial hall as a much younger Ariana, watching her mother, Queen Sorella, address the royal council. The Queen's passionate advocacy for cautious engagement with the wider galactic community was met with resistance from younger versions of faces he now recognized, including Uxin, already positioned as a voice for isolationist tradition. In the memory, Ariana felt both inspired by her mother's vision and terrified of the opposition it generated. When the session ended, she followed her mother to a private garden, where the Queen knelt to her daughter's level. Remember, Ariana. Queen Sorella said, her voice resonant with conviction. Tradition exists to guide us, not to imprison us. The greatest honor we can show our ancestors is not blind obedience to their ways, but the courage to adapt their wisdom to new challenges they could never have foreseen. The memory shifted to a later time, the Queen's death chamber. Ariana stood beside her mother's bed as the royal physicians withdrew their expressions, confirming what everyone already knew: the mysterious illness had progressed beyond treatment. Emperor Valerian sat broken beside his wife, his usual imperial composure shattered by grief. Promise me, the dying queen whispered to Ariana. Promise you will continue what I began. Virelia cannot remain isolated forever. Change must come, but it must come with respect for who we have always been. I promise, Mother, the young princess vowed, tears streaming down her face. And you, the queen, turned to her husband, must protect her when I am gone. There are those who would rather see our line end than allow the changes that must come. The emperor's response was lost as the memory began to fade, but the emotion lingered, grief intertwined with purpose, a daughter's promise becoming a life's mission. When Elias awoke, he found his face wet with tears that weren't his own. The bond had shared not just the memory, but the raw emotion attached to it. He understood now on a visceral level what drove Ariana's reforms. This wasn't mere political ambition or abstract idealism. It was a sacred vow to a dying mother and a genuine belief that her people's survival depended on carefully managed change. The revelation left him with a renewed sense of purpose as dawn broke on the day of the purification ritual. Whatever dangers lay ahead, whatever Yuxin had planned, Elias was now fighting not just for Ariana's safety or his own survival, but for the fulfillment of a promise and the future of a civilization poised between tradition and necessary evolution. The Temple of Ancestral Purification stood atop the highest point of the Hill of Ancestors, its ancient stone structure gleaming with embedded minerals that caught the morning light. Unlike the more modernized buildings of the capital city, the temple appeared virtually unchanged from the time of its construction thousands of years earlier, a physical manifestation of Varelian tradition's resistance to change. Elias watched from a concealed position as Ariana's processional approached the temple steps. She walked alone, dressed in ceremonial white robes, embroidered with family sigils, her normally loose hair bound in intricate braids that signified submission to ancestral authority. Behind her, at a respectful distance, came Emperor Valerian and the council members, including Uxan, whose satisfied expression sent a chill through Elias despite the morning heat. The separation was already affecting them both. Elias felt a persistent discomfort, not quite pain, but a wrongness that grew sharper with each step Ariana took away from him. Through their strengthened bond, he sensed her experiencing the same sensation, though her face betrayed nothing to the observers. Once Ariana had entered the temple with a ceremonial escort, Elias made his way to the hidden entrance Elder Sonai had identified in the ancient maps. It was located in a seemingly solid rock face at the base of the hill, concealed by natural formations and visible only if one knew precisely where to look. The entrance mechanism was ingenious in its simplicity, a series of carved handholds that, when pressed in the correct sequence, triggered a stone panel to slide sideways. Elias followed the memorized pattern and was rewarded with the soft grinding of stone against stone as a narrow passage opened before him. The tunnel beyond was dark and low-ceilinged, forcing him to crouch as he made his way forward. He activated a small light source, careful to keep it shielded to avoid detection, and began the journey through Virelia's ancient past. The passage walls were covered with elaborate carvings, depicting historical events, religious ceremonies, and what appeared to be instructions or warnings in an archaic form of Varelian script. Elias moved carefully, mindful of Riva's warnings about ancient defenses. His caution proved warranted when, after several minutes of progress, he encountered the first security measure, a section of floor that subtly differed in color from the surrounding stone. Remembering the maps, he recognized this as a pressure plate that would trigger some unknown mechanism if stepped upon. Pressing himself against the wall, Elias edged past the trap section, only to find himself facing a more complex challenge, a chamber where the floor was entirely composed of similar plates with no clear safe path across. He paused, considering his options. Turning back wasn't viable, not with Ariana moving deeper into the temple above him. The discomfort of their separation was increasing steadily, and through the bond, he sensed she had already begun the preliminary stages of the ritual. Examining the chamber more carefully, Elias noticed symbols carved above each pressure plate, variations on the same ancestral markings he had seen throughout the palace. Some appeared more worn than others, suggesting they had been stepped on more frequently. A memory flickered through the bond Ariana, as a child, learning about the sacred symbols of her lineage. The most important ancestral markers were touched reverently during ceremonies, while lesser bloodlines were acknowledged but not directly engaged with. Understanding bloomed the safe path would follow the hierarchy of Ariana's direct ancestral line. Focusing on the symbols, Elias identified the markers representing her family's primary lineage and carefully stepped only on those plates. He made it halfway across before a misstep sent a tremor through the chamber. Freezing in place, he felt rather than heard ancient machinery activating somewhere within the walls. A section of ceiling began to lower gradually, threatening to crush him if he remained in place. Abandoning caution, Elias rushed forward, following his instinct and the faint guidance of the bond. He reached the far side of the chamber, just as the ceiling descended completely, sealing the room behind him. Breathing heavily, he continued onward, now guided as much by his connection to Ariana as by the memorized maps. The discomfort of separation had evolved into a dull, persistent ache that centered in his chest, where the ceremonial dagger had struck him weeks earlier. Through the bond, he sensed Ariana's growing unease as she progressed through the ritual's opening phases. The temple priestesses, Uxan's selected loyalists, were leading her through initial purifications, involving water smoke and chanted invocations. Soon, they would reach the crucial moment when the Voshanti elixir would be administered. Elias quickened his pace, navigating two more security measures, a section where specific hand patterns needed to be pressed into the wall, and a narrow bridge over what appeared to be a bottomless chasm. The latter particularly tested his resolve, as the ancient stone creaked alarmingly beneath his weight. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was likely less than one, he reached the hidden observation chamber behind the purification room. A small, perfectly crafted opening in the stone wall allowed limited visual access, while remaining essentially invisible from the other side. Peering through, Elias saw Ariana kneeling in the center of a circular room. She was surrounded by 7 priestesses in elaborate ceremonial attire, each holding a different ritual implement. Behind them, seated in specially designated alcoves, were Emperor Valerian and the council members, their positions elevating them above the ceremony, while allowing them to witness it. Uxan sat closest to the emperor, occasionally leaning toward him, to whisper comments that Valerian acknowledged with slight nods. The counselor's expression remained outwardly reverent, but Elias detected an undercurrent of anticipation that confirmed their suspicions about his intentions. The lead priestess, a severe-looking woman with extensive facial markings, approached Ariana, carrying an ornate chalice that emitted faint wisps of greenish vapor. The Voshanti elixir had been prepared. Through their bond, Elias felt Ariana's determination mingled with apprehension. She knew what was coming and had prepared herself mentally as best she could, but the Voshanti's effects were powerful and largely unavoidable. Princess Ariana Virilan Solaris. The priestess intoned her voice, carrying the weight of centuries of tradition. This sacred elixir will clear your mind of external influences and open your consciousness to the wisdom of your ancestors. Drink and be purified. As Ariana accepted the chalice, Elias felt her project a clear thought toward him. I will resist as long as possible. Be ready. She drank, and the effect was almost immediate. Through their bond, Elias experienced a disorienting surge, as Ariana's consciousness expanded and fragmented simultaneously. Colors became more vivid, sounds, more textured, and time itself seemed to flow irregularly. Most significantly, her mental barriers thinned, leaving her thoughts exposed and malleable. The priestesses began a rhythmic chant, guiding Ariana deeper into the trance state. She swayed slightly, her eyes unfocused, as ancestral memories began to surface. Generations of rulers, facing challenges, making decisions, upholding traditions. Then, as the chanting reached a crescendo, the lead priestess moved closer to Ariana and began speaking in a lower tone that wouldn't carry to the observing nobles. Hear the wisdom of your ancestors, princess, she murmured. They speak through me now. The path you have chosen is false. Your reforms threaten the purity of our bloodlines and the stability of our society. External influences have corrupted your judgment. Through the bond, Elias felt Ariana struggling to maintain her sense of self against these suggestions. The Voshanti made the priestess's words resonate with artificial authority, as though they truly came from revered ancestors rather than Uxan's political agenda. Your mother was misguided, the priestess continued, striking at Ariana's core motivation. Her vision would have destroyed everything our people have built. Your father knows this truth, but has been weakened by grief. You must abandon her path and return to traditional ways. Elias sensed Ariana's mental resistance wavering as the elixir's influence deepened. The false ancestral voices were becoming harder to distinguish from genuine memory, the suggested doubts blending with her own fears. The human who saved you is an anomaly, a disruption in the sacred order. The priestess added, moving to the true purpose of this manipulation. His continued presence pollutes our court and threatens our genetic purity. You must sever all connections to him and pledge yourself to a proper Varelian union." At this direct attack on their bond, Elias felt a surge of protective anger rise within him. The sensation flooded through their connection, giving Ariana a momentary anchor against the swirling influences of the Vishanti. The lead priestess frowned, sensing unexpected resistance. She gestured to her colleagues, who intensified their chanting while she continued her subversive whispers. "The human has formed an unnatural attachment to you," she suggested. "This is why you feel conflict. His alien influence must be purged entirely from your mind and body. You will request his immediate return to Earth upon completion of this ceremony." Elias watched Uxin lean forward in his observation alcove, clearly recognizing that a crucial moment had arrived. The counselor made a subtle hand signal to the priestess, who nodded almost imperceptibly before producing a small crystal vial filled with luminescent blue liquid. This wasn't part of the traditional ritual. Through their bond, Elias sensed Ariana's momentary confusion cutting through the Vishanti's effects. "To complete your purification," the priestess announced loud enough for all observers to hear, "you must cleanse your blood of any foreign elements. This sacred essence will burn away all external influences and restore your pure Varelian nature." Ariana's alarm cut through the bond like a knife. "This is not part of the ritual, it's poison or worse." Elias didn't hesitate. He pressed the specific pattern Elder Sonai had described on the observation wall, causing a hidden door to swing inward. In 3 long strides, he was in the purification chamber, interrupting the sacred ceremony in a way that no outsider had ever dared. "Stop!" he commanded, his voice echoing off the ancient stones. Gasps and shouts of outrage erupted from the observing counselors. The emperor rose to his feet, his expression a mixture of shock and fury. The priestesses froze in place, the lead one still holding the suspicious vial. "This is sacrilege," Uxin thundered, pointing an accusing finger at Elias. "The human defiles our most sacred ritual." Elias ignored him, focusing entirely on Ariana, who was struggling to break free of the Vishanti's influence. Through their bond, he projected clarity and strength, helping her fight through the elixir's effects. "That vial contains no purification essence," Elias declared, addressing the emperor directly. "It is poison intended to harm the princess, while making it appear to be part of the ritual." "Preposterous!" Uxin sputtered. "This human has clearly lost his mind. Guards, remove him immediately." Temple guards moved toward Elias, but he stood his ground. "Test the substance," he challenged. "If I'm wrong, I'll accept any punishment your laws demand." Emperor Valerian raised a hand, halting the guards. Despite his obvious anger at the interruption, the emperor's concern for his daughter overrode his outrage. "Explain yourself, human," he commanded. "The purification ritual has been corrupted," Elias stated firmly. "High Counselor Uxin selected these specific priestesses because they are loyal to him, not to the crown. The additional substance they attempted to administer is not part of the traditional ceremony." The lead priestess found her voice. "This is a sacred purifying essence used in ancient times." "Then you won't mind drinking it yourself," Elias interrupted his tone, leaving no room for argument. The priestess blanched instinctively, clutching the vial closer to her robes, a telling reaction that did not go unnoticed by the emperor. "Give me the vial," Valerian commanded, his voice deadly calm. When the priestess hesitated, 2 royal guards moved to flank her. Reluctantly, she surrendered the blue liquid to the emperor, who examined it carefully. "This bears the mark of the Nephilim orchid," he observed, his expression darkening. "A substance that does not purify, but severs specifically. It severs bonded connections of all kinds, including familial ones." His gaze shifted to Uxin. "Why would my daughter need such a thing, Counselor?" Uxin's composure finally cracked. "The human has corrupted her. Can you not see it? They have formed an abomination, a Dareth bond between species. It must be severed before it permanently taints our royal bloodline." The chamber fell silent as the accusation hung in the air. All eyes turned to Ariana, who was now standing shakily, fighting through the remaining effects of the Vishanti. "Is this true?" the Emperor asked his daughter, his voice barely audible. Ariana straightened, summoning her royal dignity, despite the circumstances. "Yes, father." When Lieutenant Cade intercepted the assassination attempt, his blood mixed with mine upon the ancestral symbols. The Dareth bond activated of its own accord. Murmurs of shock and outrage rippled through the council members. Several made warding gestures against perceived contamination. "Impossible," one elderly counselor protested. "The sacred bond cannot form with non-Virelian blood. Our ancestors ensured this protection." "And yet it has happened," Ariana replied firmly. "The bond is real and it grows stronger daily. This proves what I have argued all along, that the differences between our species are not as fundamental as tradition has led us to believe." Uxin seized on this confirmation. "You see, she admits to the abomination. This proves her unfitness to rule. The poison, no. The cleansing agent was necessary to free her from this corruption before it became irreversible. And yet you concealed this necessity within a sacred ritual without informing me," the Emperor observed coldly. "You acted without imperial authority, counselor." "I acted to preserve our bloodline and traditions." Uxin insisted, his composure fully abandoning him now. "Something you have failed to do since Sorella poisoned your mind with her progressive nonsense." The mention of the dead queen in such terms visibly shocked the Emperor. His expression hardened into something dangerous as he turned to the guards. "Detain Counselor Uxin and these priestesses," he ordered. "They will be questioned thoroughly regarding this unauthorized addition to a sacred imperial ritual." As guards moved to comply, Uxin made a desperate gesture toward the remaining temple guards, clearly his pre-positioned loyalists. 3 of them immediately moved to block the royal guards, while another rushed toward Ariana with a weapon drawn. Elias reacted instinctively, placing himself between the princess and danger once again. But this time, something extraordinary happened. The Dareth bond pulsed with unprecedented power, and Elias felt Ariana's consciousness partially merge with his own. Suddenly, he had access to fighting techniques he had never learned, ancient Virelian martial arts passed down through generations of royal guardians. His body moved with a fluid grace that combined his military training with these newly accessible skills. He disarmed the attacking guard with a precise strike to nerve points that human anatomy didn't possess, but Virelian physiology did, knowledge that came directly through the bond from Ariana's ancestral memories. Similarly, Ariana found herself accessing Elias's combat awareness, anticipating threats from multiple directions simultaneously. Together, moving as a coordinated unit, linked by the bond, they neutralized the immediate danger, while the loyal royal guards engaged with Uxin's remaining supporters. Uxin himself, seeing his plan crumbling, made a desperate lunge toward the Emperor with a concealed blade. Elias sensed the attack through the bond, Ariana's heightened awareness of court dynamics, recognizing the subtle shift in Uxin's posture before he moved. "Father, behind you!" Ariana cried out. The Emperor turned just in time to avoid the full force of the strike, receiving only a glancing wound to his shoulder. Royal guards immediately subdued Uxin, forcing him to his knees, before the Emperor he had just attempted to assassinate. "Treason!" Valerian pronounced, his voice vibrating with controlled fury. "Against the crown, against your sacred oaths, against the very traditions you claim to protect." Uxin glared defiantly. "I acted to protect Virelia from corruption. History will vindicate me when your daughter's human-tainted bloodline destroys everything our ancestors built." The Emperor regarded his former advisor with cold disdain. "You will have ample time to contemplate historical vindication in the isolation cells beneath the palace." As guards led Uxin and his co-conspirators away, Valerian turned his attention to Elias and Ariana. His expression was unreadable as he studied them, particularly the faint luminescence that pulsed visibly beneath their skin where the bond was strongest. "We have much to discuss," he said finally. "About this bond, about its implications, and about the future of Virelia. But not here. This sacred space has been defiled enough today." He addressed the remaining counselors. The full council will convene tomorrow at midday to address these unprecedented events. As they departed the temple, Elias and Ariana walked side by side, their connection humming with renewed strength after the temporary separation. Through the bond, they shared a mixture of relief, uncertainty, and determination. What happens now? Elias thought, finding that direct mental communication came more easily after their partial consciousness merger during the fight. We face the council together, Ariana replied similarly. And we proved that the Dareth Bond's choice was not a mistake or an abomination, but perhaps the beginning of a new understanding between our peoples. Elias wasn't sure if such optimism was warranted given the horrified reactions of many counselors, but one thing had become abundantly clear: their fates were now inextricably linked, not just by the bond, but by the political earthquake they had just triggered in Varelian society. The Great Hall of Ancestral Judgment had not been used for an official imperial proceeding in over a century. Its vast circular chamber, lined with statues of past emperors and empresses, created an atmosphere of solemn historical weight that no modern setting could match. The stone floor was inlaid with luminescent minerals that formed a complex pattern, representing the interconnected bloodlines of all noble Varelian houses, a visual reminder that any judgment rendered here affected not just individuals, but lineages stretching back millennia. Elias stood beside Ariana at the center of this imposing space, both of them positioned on the imperial house's symbol. Surrounding them in concentric circles were the remaining council members, the heads of major noble houses' military commanders, including Riva Earth diplomatic representatives, led by Ambassador Thorn, and various religious and cultural leaders. Emperor Valerian sat upon a temporary throne elevated above the proceedings. Despite the wound from Uxan's attack, he projected imperial authority, his face set in an expression of solemn purpose. "We gather to address matters unprecedented in our history." The emperor began, his voice carrying effortlessly through the acoustically perfect chamber. The attempted assassination of Princess Ariana, the treasonous conspiracy of High Counselor Uxan, and most significantly for our future, the formation of a Dareth bond between the heir to the eternal throne and a human officer. Murmurs rippled through the assembled dignitaries, though no one dared interrupt the emperor directly. "Before judgment is rendered," Valerian continued, "we shall hear testimony from all relevant parties, beginning with the bond-bearers themselves." Ariana stepped forward, first every inch the royal heir, despite the uncertainty of her position. "Honored father, esteemed council, noble houses of Varelia," she began, her voice clear and confident. "The Dareth bond that now connects Lieutenant Elias Cade and myself, activated through no deliberate action on either part. It came into being the moment he placed himself between an assassin's blade and my heart, an act of selfless protection that our most sacred traditions have always honored." She paused, allowing her words to settle before continuing. "For generations we have believed that the Dareth bond could only form between Varelians of noble blood. This assumption has now been proven false, which raises a profound question. What other assumptions about our separation from other species might also be incorrect?" This direct challenge to conventional wisdom caused visible discomfort among the traditionalists, but Ariana pressed on. "The bond has progressed through 3 phases already: initiation, memory sharing, and protection. In each stage, it has functioned exactly as our ancient texts describe, despite Lieutenant Cade's human physiology. More significantly, during yesterday's confrontation, we experienced the beginning of the 4th phase, unification, accessing each other's abilities in a moment of shared danger." She turned slightly toward Elias, their connected energies visibly pulsing beneath their skin. "This is not an abomination, as Counselor Uxan claimed, but perhaps the most profound evidence yet that the path of cautious engagement with other worlds, the path my mother advocated, is indeed our destiny." Several counselors shifted uncomfortably, but others nodded thoughtfully. Elias noticed Ambassador Thorne watching with barely concealed amazement, clearly processing the diplomatic implications of this unprecedented connection. When Ariana finished, Elias stepped forward to offer his perspective. He spoke plainly, without diplomatic flourishes or political calculation, an approach that seemed to resonate with many of the military leaders present. "I did not come to Virelia seeking this bond," he stated candidly. "Nor did I fully understand its significance when it activated. But having experienced its effects, having shared memories and abilities with Princess Ariana, I cannot view it as anything but meaningful." He addressed the concern that seemed to underlie much of the opposition. "I understand your fear of contamination or dilution of your traditions. Earth's history contains many examples of cultures that disappeared through uncontrolled integration with others. But there is a difference between thoughtful engagement and reckless abandonment of identity. The Dareth bond itself proves this. It has connected us without erasing either of our distinct natures." Following their testimony, various experts presented evidence regarding the bond's authenticity and implications. Temple scholars confirmed that all observable manifestations matched historical accounts of legitimate Dareth bonds. Medical specialists presented scans showing the unprecedented quantum resonance between Virelian and human cellular structures. Most compelling was the testimony of Elder Sonai, who had helped them access the temple passages. The ancient priestess, respected even by the most conservative factions, presented historical texts suggesting that the original architects of the Dareth bond had designed it to recognize worthy souls, regardless of physical form, a nuance that had been lost over centuries of isolationist interpretation. Throughout these presentations, Elias and Ariana remained connected through the bond-sharing observations and providing each other strength as the weight of scrutiny pressed upon them. They could sense the chamber's emotional currents shifting gradually from outrage and shock toward cautious curiosity, at least among some factions. Finally, Emperor Valerian rose to deliver his judgment, silence falling instantly across the hall. "The evidence presented confirms beyond doubt that a true Dareth bond exists between my daughter and Lieutenant Cade," he declared. "Our ancestral laws regarding such bonds are clear and inviolable. Those joined by the Dareth bond are considered unified in purpose by the will of our ancestors themselves. No earthly authority, not even the Emperor, may sever or deny such a connection." He paused, his gaze sweeping the assembly. "However, the unprecedented nature of this particular bond crossing species boundaries, that we believed impermeable, requires us to consider its broader implications carefully." The tension in the room was palpable, as all waited for the Emperor's next words. "Princess Ariana remains heir to the Eternal Throne." He continued, triggering visible relief from her supporters and resigned acceptance from most opposition factions. "The Dareth bond's selection of Lieutenant Cade as her protector must be honored according to our most sacred traditions." Here, he paused again, clearly approaching the most controversial aspect of his decision. "Therefore, I hereby establish a new position within our imperial structure, Dareth Sentinel of the Crown. Lieutenant Elias Cade will hold this position with all rights and responsibilities traditionally accorded to bonded protectors, while serving as bridge between our world and Earth." Murmurs erupted again, but Valerian raised a hand for silence. "This arrangement honors both our traditions and the new reality we must now navigate. The Dareth bond has always been viewed as a sign from our ancestors' guidance during times of significant change. We would be fools to ignore such guidance now, when the wider galaxy presses ever closer to our borders." His expression softened slightly as he looked directly at his daughter. "Sorella would be proud of your courage, Ariana. Perhaps she understood more than any of us what the future would require." The formal declaration was followed by a complex ritual that officially recognized Elias's unprecedented position. He knelt before the Emperor to receive a ceremonial band of office, a metallic armband inscribed with symbols representing both his Earth origins and his new Virelian connection. As the ceremony concluded and the assembly began to disperse, Ambassador Thorne approached Elias with an expression that mingled disbelief and diplomatic calculation. "Well, Lieutenant," he said quietly, "when I assigned you to observe a diplomatic function, I didn't anticipate you becoming a permanent fixture in an alien royal court." "Neither did I, sir," Elias admitted. Thorne studied him thoughtfully. "Earth Command will have many questions about the nature of this bond and its potential significance for interspecies relations." "I understand, sir. I'm prepared to provide whatever information might be helpful." "Are you?" Thorne asked pointedly. "Because from what I've observed, this connection goes far beyond professional duty or diplomatic convenience. The implications are profound." Before Elias could respond, Ariana joined them, acknowledging the ambassador with formal respect. "Ambassador Thorne, I hope you will convey to your government that Lieutenant Cade's new position represents an unprecedented opportunity for deepening understanding between our worlds." "Indeed, Your Highness," Thorne replied smoothly, "though I suspect many on Earth will wonder where his ultimate loyalties now lie." The question hung in the air, its significance extending beyond mere diplomacy to the core of Elias's identity. Through their bond, Ariana sensed his momentary uncertainty, the pull between his Earth origins and his new Varelian connection. "His loyalty is to truth and protection," she answered for him, as it has always been. The bond did not change Lieutenant Cade's essence. It simply recognized qualities that already existed. Thorne nodded thoughtfully. "A diplomatic answer, Your Highness. I look forward to seeing how this unprecedented arrangement develops." He turned back to Elias. "I'll expect regular reports, Lieutenant. This position of yours may have been arranged by ancient alien mysticism, but you're still technically attached to the Earth diplomatic corps." "Yes, sir," Elias agreed, though they both understood that the situation had moved well beyond normal chain of command. In the days that followed, Elias and Ariana worked to establish the practical parameters of their new reality. The bond continued to strengthen, allowing increasingly sophisticated mental communication and emotional awareness. They developed protocols for maintaining appropriate boundaries, despite their connection crucial for both Ariana's political functions and Elias's sanity. The wider political implications began to materialize as well. Moderate factions within the Varelian nobility, emboldened by the Emperor's acceptance of the bond, started advocating for careful expansion of diplomatic and cultural exchanges with Earth and other allied worlds. Conservative elements remained opposed, but had lost significant influence following Oxen's treason. 1 month after the confrontation at the temple, Ariana presided over the first official joint cultural exchange between Varelia and Earth, a carefully orchestrated event that allowed selected representatives from both worlds to share art, music, scientific knowledge, and philosophical perspectives in a controlled setting. Elias stood at her side during the opening ceremony, their bond a visible reminder of the unprecedented connection now forming between their worlds. As Ariana delivered her address, emphasizing shared values while respecting differences, he felt a surge of pride through their connection, not just for her diplomatic skill, but for the vision she was bringing to life. Later that evening, they walked alone through the palace gardens, one of the few places where they could speak privately, without the weight of constant observation. "Your mother would indeed be proud," Elias said, referencing the memory he had experienced of Queen Sorella's dying wish. Ariana smiled, an expression that had become more frequent as the political pressure had gradually eased. "Sometimes I feel her presence, especially during important moments. Perhaps it's just memory, or perhaps something more. Having experienced the reality of the Dareth bond, I'm less quick to dismiss the something more possibilities," Elias admitted. They walked in comfortable silence for a while, the twin moons of Varelia casting their distinctive blue-silver light across the crystalline plants that surrounded them. "I received a message from my mother today," Elias said eventually. "Ambassador Thorne arranged for it to be transmitted from Earth." "How did she react to your new position?" Ariana asked, sensing the emotional complexity behind his statement. "Better than I expected. She said she always knew I'd find my place eventually, though she admitted an alien royal court wasn't on her list of possibilities. He smiled slightly at the memory. She wants to visit if that ever becomes possible. I would like to meet her, Ariana said sincerely. The memories I've experienced through the bond show how much she shaped who you are. Elias nodded, then hesitated before voicing the question that had been on his mind, increasingly often. What happens when the bond reaches completion? The final phase. Ariana turned to face him directly. According to the ancient texts, completion represents the full realization of the bond's purpose, a permanent joining that transcends ordinary connections. Bonded pairs who reach this state were said to experience a synthesis of strengths while maintaining their individual identities. That's the technical answer, Elias observed, but not the complete one. She smiled at his perception, a benefit of their deepening connection. No, not complete. In our history, many bonded pairs who reached completion also formed personal unions. The intensity of the connection often led naturally to romantic attachment, though this was never a requirement of the bond itself. The possibility hung between them, unacknowledged until now, but increasingly difficult to ignore as their connection deepened on multiple levels. And is that something you would consider? Elias asked carefully. Eventually, through the bond, he felt her genuine consideration of the question, free from political calculation or cultural prejudice. I believe the bond forms between those who are already aligned in essential ways, even if they don't recognize it initially, she said thoughtfully. It doesn't create compatibility, it reveals it. She reached out, taking his hand in a gesture that sent warmth cascading through their connection. So, yes, Elias, it is something I would consider. Not because the bond demands it, but because what we've discovered through this connection is something rare and valuable, something worth exploring further when the time is right. The admission shifted something fundamental between them, an acknowledgement of possibilities that extended beyond duty or tradition into territory that was both more personal and more profound. As they continued their walk through the gardens, the bond hummed with shared purpose and nascent understanding. They had become living symbols of connection between worlds that had once seemed irreconcilably separate. Whether as diplomatic partners, bound protectors, or potentially something more intimate, their journey had only just begun, a bridge between traditions and innovations, between preservation and necessary change. And for Elias, who had once lost everything for following his conscience, there was a sense of having found not just purpose, but home, not on Earth or Virelia specifically, but in the connection that now defined his existence. The Dareth bond had changed everything, yet, in some essential way, it had simply revealed who he had always been, someone willing to stand between danger and those who needed protection, regardless of the cost. Something on your mind? Ariana asked, sensing his contemplation through their bond. Just thinking that sometimes the longest journeys lead exactly where we needed to go, he replied with a smile. Even when the destination wasn't on any map we recognized. She nodded in understanding, her violet eyes reflecting the moonlight. That's the true wisdom of the Dareth bond, I think. It doesn't create paths that never existed. It illuminates those that were always possible, but required courage to walk. Together, they continued through the garden, two individuals from different worlds, connected by something ancient, yet entirely new, a bond that respected tradition, while embracing change, much like the future they were now helping to create.